Stop the tape, Dr. Phil said. But this time, his voice trembled. Someone he hadn't seen in 47 years had just walked through that door. The cameras kept rolling. The audience held their breath. And Dr. Phil, the man who had guided thousands through their darkest moments, stood frozen in the middle of his own stage, unable to speak. What you're about to witness is not just a television moment. It's the kind of rupture that changes everything, for a family, for a man, and for everyone watching. But to understand what happened in that studio, we need to go back. Back to where it all began. It was supposed to be a regular Tuesday taping. The guest was Margaret, a 68-year-old grandmother from rural Texas who had written to the show about reconnecting with her estranged family. Her story was familiar: decades of silence, unspoken resentments, a lifetime of wondering. What if? Dr. Phil had reviewed her file that morning. Standard case. Painful, yes, but manageable. He had done this 1,000 times before. Margaret sat in the guest chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. A worn envelope rested beside her, yellowed with age, its edges soft from years of handling. She had carried it for over 4 decades, never showing it to anyone. The envelope had traveled with her through 3 marriages, 2 cross-country moves, and countless sleepless nights. It was more than paper. It was a piece of her soul she had never been able to let go. Margaret, Dr. Phil began, leaning forward with his characteristic directness. You've spent 47 years holding on to something. Tell me, what's in that envelope? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. It's a letter, she whispered. A letter I wrote to my daughter the day I had to give her up. She was 3 days old. The studio fell completely silent. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. Even the camera operators stopped adjusting their equipment. You gave up a child? Dr. Phil asked, his voice softer now. Margaret nodded. I was 17. Unmarried. My family gave me no choice. They told me she would have a better life. She wiped her eyes with a trembling hand. But I never stopped thinking about her. Not for one single day. Every time I saw a little girl with brown hair, I wondered if it was her. Every birthday, I lit a candle and made a wish, not for myself, but for her. Dr. Phil leaned back, processing. This wasn't in the file. The producers had known about the estrangement, but not this. Not a secret held for nearly 5 decades. He glanced at his production team. Their faces mirrored his own surprise. Have you ever tried to find her? He asked. I did, Margaret said. 3 years ago. I hired someone. They found her. She paused, her voice breaking. But she doesn't want to see me. She sent back my letter unopened. I held that returned envelope in my hands and I felt like my heart had been ripped out all over again. Dr. Phil studied her face. He had seen pain before. Thousands of times on this very stage. But there was something different here. Something that resonated deeper than usual. This wasn't just grief. This was a wound that had never been allowed to heal. Margaret, why did you come here today? What do you want from this? She looked directly into his eyes. I want her to know that I never abandoned her in my heart. That every birthday, every Christmas, every single day, I thought of her. I want her to know that giving her up was the hardest thing I ever did. And that I'm sorry. I need her to know that before I die. I'm 68 years old, Dr. Phil. I don't have forever. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The taping continued. Dr. Phil guided Margaret through her story with the precision of a surgeon, extracting details, illuminating patterns, helping her see her own narrative more clearly. He asked about her childhood, her parents, the circumstances that led to that impossible decision in 1977. You've carried guilt for 47 years, he said. But guilt is about what you did. Shame is about who you are. Which one are you really carrying? Margaret considered this. Both, she finally admitted. I feel guilty for signing those papers. But I feel shame because, Because what kind of mother gives away her child? A 17-year-old girl with no support, no resources, and no choice. Dr. Phil responded firmly. That's not a monster, Margaret. That's a child herself, doing the only thing she could do. You were failed by the adults around you. You were failed by a system that gave you no options. That shame you're carrying? It doesn't belong to you. For the first time, Margaret's shoulders seemed to relax slightly. Someone had finally said what she needed to hear for almost 50 years. Dr. Phil turned to the audience. How many of you have ever made a decision under pressure that you've questioned for years afterward? Hands went up across the studio. Nearly everyone. That's the human condition, he continued. We make choices with the information we have at the time. Judging your 17-year-old self by your 68-year-old standards isn't fair. It isn't even logical. You have to forgive that young girl. She did the best she could. Off camera, Dr. Phil noticed movement near the studio entrance. A producer was speaking urgently into her headset. Something was happening. He could feel the energy in the room shift. He continued talking to Margaret, but his attention was divided now. In 30 years of television, he had learned to read a room, and something had shifted. The air felt different. Charged. Like the moment before a storm breaks. The producer approached the stage, walking faster than protocol allowed. She leaned in and whispered something in Dr. Phil's ear. His face changed. Not dramatically, Dr. Phil was too experienced for that, but those who knew him could see it. A flicker of something. Surprise? Disbelief? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He pulled back and looked at the producer. Are you certain? She nodded, her own eyes wide. Dr. Phil took a breath. Then another. He looked at Margaret, who was watching him with confusion and growing alarm. Margaret, he said slowly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, she said, her voice shaking. When you came here today, did you know that your daughter had been contacted by our show? Margaret's face went pale. What? No. I didn't. I had no idea. How would I know that? Dr. Phil studied her reaction. It was genuine. She truly didn't know. Your daughter, he said carefully, weighing each word, is here. She's backstage. Right now. She arrived 20 minutes ago. The audience gasped. Margaret's hand flew to her chest. What? That's not possible. She refused to see me. She sent back my letter. She made it clear she wanted nothing to do with me. I know, Dr. Phil said. But she's here. And she's asking to see you. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Dr. Phil raised his hand toward the control room. Stop the tape. Everyone stop. I mean it. Everything stops right now. The red lights on the cameras blinked off. The studio fell into an eerie quiet, the kind of silence that only exists when machinery stops and humans hold their breath. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. He stood up from his chair and walked toward Margaret. Not as a host. Not as a television personality. As a man who understood the weight of this moment. Margaret, look at me, he said, kneeling beside her chair. What's about to happen could be the most important moment of your life. Or it could reopen wounds that have barely healed. I need to know, do you want to see her? Because if you're not ready, we don't do this. Your well-being comes first. Margaret was shaking now. Tears streamed down her face. The envelope, that worn, yellowed envelope, was clutched against her chest like a lifeline, like the only thing keeping her tethered to earth. I've waited 47 years for this, she whispered. I've dreamed about it. Prayed for it. But I'm terrified. What if she hates me? What if she came here just to tell me that in person? What if I see her face and she looks at me with disgust? Dr. Phil took her hands in his. Then you'll hear it. And you'll survive it. Because you've survived everything else. You survived giving her up. You survived 47 years of silence. You survived that returned letter. You're stronger than you know, Margaret. He paused. But Margaret, what if she came here to forgive you? What if this is the moment you've been waiting for your entire life? He turned to his producer. Bring her in. But slowly. Let them see each other first. No rushing this. The side door of the studio opened. And there she was. Her name was Catherine. 52 years old. She had her mother's eyes, the same deep brown, the same way they crinkled at the corners when emotions ran high. She had Margaret's cheekbones, Margaret's slight frame, Margaret's way of holding herself when she was afraid. She stood in the doorway frozen. Just like her mother. Just like Dr. Phil had been moments before. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Margaret rose from her chair. Her legs barely held her. Catherine? It was the first time she had spoken her daughter's name out loud in 47 years. The name she had given her in the hospital, before it was changed by the adoptive parents. Catherine didn't move. Didn't speak. But her chin trembled. Her hands, at her sides, opened and closed, as if reaching for something she couldn't quite grasp. As if trying to hold on to something that had always slipped away. I wrote to you, Margaret said, her voice barely audible. I wrote to you every year on your birthday. I never sent them. I didn't know where you were. But I have them. All of them. 47 letters. Every single year. Catherine's composure cracked. Why? She asked, her voice hard but breaking. Why did you give me up? I've asked myself that question my entire life. Every time something went wrong, every time I felt alone, I wondered, why wasn't I good enough to keep? Margaret took a step forward. Because I was 17. Because my parents said you deserved better. Because I believed them. Because I had nothing to offer you, no money, no stability, no future. She held up the envelope. But I never let go of you. Not really. This was the first letter. The one I wrote in the hospital, 3 days after you were born, while they were taking you away from me. I've carried it with me every single day since. She extended the envelope toward her daughter. I never stopped being your mother. Not in here. She pressed her hand to her heart. You were always with me. Always. Catherine stared at the envelope. At her mother. At the 47 years of silence that stretched between them like an ocean. All those years of anger. All those years of questions. All those years of wondering what her mother's voice sounded like. And then she moved. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just one step. Then another. Until she was close enough to touch the woman who had given her life, and then given her away. She took the envelope. Her hands shook as she opened it. Something her mother had never done, never dared to do, because opening it meant facing the pain all over again. Inside was a single page. Handwritten. The ink faded but legible. Catherine read it aloud, her voice trembling. To my daughter. I don't know your name yet. I don't know who you'll become. But I know that I love you. I know that letting you go is breaking something inside me that will never heal. Please forgive me. Please know that wherever you are, whatever you do, you are loved. You were always loved. You will always be loved. Your mother. The studio was silent. Even the crew, hardened professionals who had seen everything, wiped their eyes. Some openly wept. Catherine looked up from the letter. Looked at her mother. And said the words Margaret had waited a lifetime to hear. I forgive you. Margaret collapsed into her daughter's arms. 47 years of grief, guilt, and longing released in a single moment. The audience rose to their feet. Not because anyone told them to, but because sitting felt impossible in the presence of such raw, redemptive love. Dr. Phil stood apart, watching. His eyes glistened. In 3 decades of television, he had witnessed countless reunions, countless moments of healing. But this was different. This was sacred. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Later, after the cameras had stopped and the audience had left, Dr. Phil sat with Margaret and Catherine in his office. No cameras. No producers. Just 3 people and the weight of what had happened. The office was quiet, the afternoon light filtering through the blinds. "What made you come?" Dr. Phil asked Catherine. "After all these years of refusing contact? After sending back that letter?" Catherine looked at her mother, then back at him. "I saw a clip of her interview online. Someone had recorded the first part of the taping, before I arrived, and posted it. I saw her holding that envelope. Saw her crying. Saw her telling you about the letters she wrote every year." She paused. "And I realized something." "What?" "That she had carried me with her. Every single day. That envelope was proof. She didn't forget me. She didn't move on. She didn't have other children and pretend I never existed. She held on to me the only way she could. For 47 years. Dr. Phil nodded slowly. Forgiveness isn't about saying what happened was okay. It's about deciding that what happened isn't going to control your future anymore. You both made that choice today. You chose freedom over resentment. You chose love over pain. Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a thick stack of envelopes, 47 of them, bound with a faded ribbon. "These are yours now," she said, handing them to Catherine. "Every birthday. Every year. They're all here. Every thought, every hope, every prayer I ever had for you." Catherine held the bundle like it was made of glass. "I'll read every one." "And then?" Dr. Phil asked. Catherine smiled through her tears. "And then we start making new memories. We have time to make up for. Not much, maybe, but some. And some is more than we had yesterday." They left the studio together that day, mother and daughter, side by side for the first time since 1977. The envelope that had held them apart for 47 years now held them together. Dr. Phil later reflected on that moment in an interview. "In all my years of doing this work," he said, "I've learned that the things we carry, the secrets, the guilt, the unopened letters, they don't get lighter with time. They get heavier. The only way to set them down is to share them." Margaret carried that letter for 47 years. It took one moment of courage to finally deliver it. One moment to change 2 lifetimes. He paused, then added, "That's the work. That's why we do this. Not for the ratings. Not for the applause. For the moments when 2 people finally see each other, really see each other, and decide that love is stronger than time. Stronger than fear. Stronger than 47 years of silence." For Margaret and Catherine, that day wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. And for everyone who witnessed it, in the studio, or watching at home, it was a reminder. It's never too late to open the envelope. It's never too late to say the words. It's never too late to come home. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to never miss moments like these. And remember, healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's about finally being brave enough to face it. Thank you for watching.